Hello, everybody. Welcome. Namaste to India. Good afternoon in India. Good morning in Australia. In the Americas. I'm so sorry. I'm confused as usual. Then it's lunchtime in Europe, and in Australia, people are ready for the evening already. So welcome everybody in your different time zones back on our Days of Miracle program. And we are on the 5th day. So we are moving forward. And today we are so happy to welcome back Venerable Jamyang from Holland, who is actually in India. So it's very nice. Thank you so much, Venerable Jamyang La, for accepting our invitation. And if you allow me, just for the people who don't know you, I think most of you do know Venerable Jamyang. I can see many familiar faces, but for those who are new, maybe I say a few words about Venerable Jamyang, if that is okay. So Venerable Jamyang comes from Holland, and she was a physiotherapist, and then she met Buddhism at Tushita, actually, if I'm well informed, in 1997. Excellent. And then met her teacher there, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and ordained in 2000. Then she studied extensively in our sister center in Australia, which is called Chenrezig Institute, gave service in Australia, and then was requested to do the master program in our sister center in Italy, Istituto Lama Zopa, just to always give you a little bit of a feeling that it's not just Tushita, we have many, many centers all around the world. And then finished those studies a few years ago and came to India, also for Tanka painting. Venerable Jamyang has many talents. And yeah, here we are, and we are so very happy to welcome you back. And today's topic is bouncing back from adversaries. Excellent. Thank you so much, Venerable Jamyang, and I give the microphone to you.
Thank you very much, Venerable Kimpen. Thank you for having me here in your program. I feel very honored to be part of this again. Last year, it was my first time, and this year we do a follow-up on that. And thank you everyone for being here, for tuning in. It is a very special time in Buddhist calendar, especially Tibetan calendar, that we celebrate Tibetan New Year and the 15 days of miracles, where the Buddha performed every day a miracle in order to convince his opponents of his qualities. And within FPMT, this is a very special time because we celebrate Lama Yeshe's life, who was one of the founders of our organization. And Lama Yeshe was a very inspirational speaker. He didn't go traditionally through the text, he would just give you the essence, you know, and so he touched many, many people, and they have carried out Buddhism as was taught by Lama Yeshe and also by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and we are still experiencing the fruits from that. And I think Tushita is one of these fruits, and then in Tushita, many people come in contact with the Dharma, and then from there they go to their own country and they keep practicing the Dharma there. So we're very fortunate. We're still having Tushita online, but soon that might change. But for now, you know, I think it just has widened the community, isn't it, Kimpen? That you can reach many more people all over the world, and that we can all come together from all over the world, and then we separate again, and then we come together. It is quite special, I think, what you guys have built up over the last 2 years. So today we're going to talk about bouncing back. And bouncing back means that we're going to talk about bouncing back from adversity. Something has happened to us, something has happened to those that we love. And sometimes we feel like defeated, or we feel like we can't get up anymore, you know. So how do we bounce back from adversities? How do we get back on our feet and say, I'm going to start again. I'm gonna just let go of everything that happened and I'm going to start again. Not easy, right? For me, not easy. So I'm going to share a little bit about my experiences that I had with bouncing back and what has helped me to get in contact with the qualities that help to bounce back when there are adversities. So what we're going to do is, I haven't planned anything in the sense that I have prepared a teaching what we can talk about. Maybe we're going to do a meditation if there is enough time for that, but I want you to have enough time and space for asking questions so that you really get a sense of, now I know what to do when adversities come. Now I have the confidence that when they come, I can prepare myself in a way that I can bounce back, or I can handle the situation in a way that I can bounce back from it. So we're going to do this together. I believe, I'm convinced that we all have an inner wisdom. And when we speak to that inner wisdom, we start to discover, oh, I already know this. Oh, I always knew this, but I forgot, or it was never validated. So I never used it. I thought it was stupid, or I thought I'm the only one who thinks like that. Right? But when we get in contact with that wisdom, we actually have a huge source within us that we can tap into when we encounter problems. And so I want to use this opportunity that we have today in order to help you connect with that wisdom. I don't know if I have to do that, but I want to give you platform or a place where you feel free and safe enough to connect with that wisdom and try it out. Is this really my wisdom, or is this a delusion? You know, and then we can help each other to find that spot in ourselves that is an endless source of good ideas and intelligence and wisdom that is there always when we need it. So feel free to ask questions. You can either put them in the chat, but I will also regularly ask you to let me know what you think about something, how it works for you, what it has done to you, so that we also can share our own experiences and that we can see, oh, I'm not the only person who is feeling like that, who is experiencing this, or who has trouble overcoming this, or, you know, that we feel actually, whatever we are experiencing, we all have a similar mind, or the workings of the mind of everyone is quite the same. And when we discover that, we feel less alone, we feel maybe we feel ashamed about the fact that we can't really deal with certain things. Maybe we hold back because we're not sure where we're coming from, you know, and then by sharing, you get more confidence that whatever is arising in your mind is totally fine. You know, it has all value. So the meaning of bouncing back is, let me see, oh no, I didn't go there yet. Wait, I'm jumping. So what are we going to do today? What are we looking at when we think about bouncing back? We're first going to look at some things that have been challenging us at this moment in the last year and how it affects us. And then we look into how does our body and our mind react in an attempt to cope? What do we do to cope? And when we see that, then we can say, is this helpful, what we are doing? Is this in the way of finding a solution, or is this contributing to a solution? Is this helping us to digest and to cope with what is going on, or is this in the way of digesting and coping with what is happening? And so often we are in the way of ourselves, right? I think you probably know that, you know, that we keep ruminating over the problem and not really having an open and clear mind to see the solutions. So we can think about what stops us from letting go. What makes that we keep doing that? And then how can we counteract that? And then we can look into what strength we need in order to be able to bounce back. And once we have some clear insight in how the mind works and what kind of place in the mind is a good place to go in order to bounce back in coming from our own inner capacity, then we can see how can we use the Dharma so that we can develop this capacity or this strength of mind. All right, that is a little bit what I want to do today. And if I forget anything and you think, but I want to talk about this, feel free to add it. Maybe it is something, we all have a blind spot. I might also leave out things that are bothering you, and I'm very happy to discuss that as well. So what is bouncing back? Bouncing back is that when a difficult situation or a difficult event arises in our life, that we can return quickly to a normal condition, that we can return quickly to a calm mind, that we can return quickly to a natural state of mind in which we can function again. So letting go what is in the way, letting go or holding on to the event, and then starting fresh again. And I don't know about you, my own experience in life is that often, when you go through a difficult event, that keeps hanging in the mind for a long time. And then the next time when there is a difficult event, it comes on top of that. And so you have two difficult events that you haven't digested yet. And then something else happens. And so if we do not know how to clean the slate so that we can start fresh again, we are actually carrying a burden with us, right? And that burden makes it more and more difficult to react in a strong way, in a healthy way, in a quick way. And I think we do that all, we have this conditioning from lifetimes, that can be like a burden that we carry with us. And so by looking into what we do in a difficult event, how the mind reacts, how the body reacts, and how we can be with that in a skillful way, then we can start cleaning out the mind more and more and more. So we're having, of course, this worldly situation, which is very difficult for many people, not for everyone, but for many people. It has been, I think, very challenging. And I was wondering if you can share what was the biggest challenge for you in the last year. Did you have a loss of friends? Did you have loss of loss, whether that is that the relationship broke up or whether that is that somebody passed away? Was there sickness? Was there loss of security, loss of income? Was there struggles within your family or with your friends? What was the biggest challenge for you? And then we use that in order to have that as you can keep that in your mind while we go through the teaching of today. And then you can relate whatever we talk about to that event. So I'm going to ask you if you will be so kind to share. So I won't name your names when I read through it, so then if you feel like you want to keep your privacy, then. So someone says, I've been suffering from long COVID, mental and physical defects. So that is very hard. So you have a loss of mental and physical health. And someone says, I have difficulty with connecting with the family overseas, you know, having not the opportunity to travel as freely as we could before. Many relationships have been disconnected, or, you know, we cannot be as intimate anymore when we do not have that regular physical contact. And someone says the war in the Ukraine on top of COVID, feeling very unsafe. Yes. And so when we started to prepare for this teaching, the war in Ukraine hadn't started yet. But the feeling of not being safe anymore. And what I just mentioned, you know, you haven't digested one of them, and then the next one is coming. And so we add up to that, and then the mind becomes more and more stressed, more and more full. And with that also, the feeling of not feeling safe comes, and then the feeling of isolation, the feeling of loneliness. And someone says, I had to move to the city and try to restart life, making new friends in a new environment. And someone says, seeing tremendous anxiety amongst the youth about the uncertain future due to the pandemic. Uncertainty is a very big one. You know, all the structures that we had in society that we thought we could rely upon seem to be totally dismantled. So someone says that relationships have been severed, although, you know, even with people that you thought you were close to. It can also be that you suddenly discover that you are in unhealthy relationships and that you feel like, no, this is enough. Now I have to stop doing that. Now I'm going too quick. Let me go up again. Increased family tension and issues. Can you say a little bit about that? What that is about? Attachment with family members. And then being in a relationship and feeling more and more unhappy about it and not knowing what to do. You know, everyone has been affected with the COVID situation, then the war on top of that, uncertainties. And so people react to that. And then suddenly when somebody is reacting in a way that we don't know the person so well, suddenly it seems that the person is changing because that reaction is constantly there. Right, so you miss the person that you actually engaged in a relationship with, and you're sitting with a person who is maybe constantly in fear or experiencing anxiety, and you feel like that's not the person that I wanted to be with. You know, that's very difficult because, of course, that person himself or herself suffers as well. And someone says isolation. Because of COVID, not being able to meet with friends and family. And so isolation is one of the very difficult issues for human beings, you know, being isolated from other human beings. I heard someone saying that, an expert, right, not a scientist, he said loneliness, how did he say that? Loneliness and isolation, he said, are the biggest causes for death, which means causes tremendous suffering in the human mind. Being isolated from others, you know, not being able to catch up with others, but also not able to check up with yourself, not being able to share what is going on, not being able to speak about, not being able to share physically. You know, when we are in the same space with other human beings who experience something similar, somehow because of the physical contact, it helps us to let go of tension. And so when that space is not available anymore because we all need to isolate or keep distance, or we're not allowed to gather even, then the tension in the body that we normally release when we are in a group cannot release anymore. So we have to deal with that ourselves, but we don't know how, because our normal way of dealing with it is being with others, you know, so that is very difficult. And then people talk about financial insecurity. You know, you might lose your job, you might Maybe you thought, oh, you know, when I'm older, I'm going to buy a house and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. All that is not certain anymore if you can do it. And then you might start feeling, I'm a failure. I cannot even provide for my family. I'm not even able of buying a house, you know, so that maybe your self-esteem gets hurt. So then there are more problems with the health. And then we are afraid that we're going to lose our loved ones, you know, especially when they're older, when they're vulnerable. And we don't know really where the danger is coming from, if it's coming from disease, if it's coming from being together, if it's coming from being separated, if it's coming from, we don't really know, you know, so that makes it also very uncertain. You cannot really rely upon anything anymore. Okay. So try to keep in mind all these sufferings, you know, that we have heard about. You know, these are just the sufferings from the people who are here. We can imagine that people around are suffering from the same thing, and maybe even worse. So someone is even having seizures, losing a business, losing income. That is huge. You know, and then you lose yourself. You're not anymore who you are. Your body doesn't function anymore how it did before. Your mind doesn't function anymore in the same way. This is huge. And you're not the only person. Right? Which is not that I'm not saying, you know, so therefore you're not important, but it is, there are so many people suffering from such huge suffering, such huge loss, affecting their physical health, affecting their mental health, affecting their relationships. Very difficult situation, right? So it is important that we know how we can be with ourselves while we are going through this. We will not be able to end that outer suffering, but we can change, or we can influence the way we react to it, the way we are with it, so that we, despite the fact that it is incredibly intense, we maybe can soften it a little bit for ourselves. You know, we can see this is just a period of time that we have to go through. So when we try to cope, how do we do that? What is our reaction to it? And that's again a question for you. What is your reaction? What is happening in your mind? What is happening in your body? Especially in the mind. Let's focus on the mind. What does your mind do? Can your mind stay focused? Or if it cannot stay focused, what is it thinking of? Is it in the past? Is it in the future? Someone says angry and says, why me? Someone has aversion and distraction from the pain. So you actually have pain and then you have aversion to the pain, right? Yes, sadness. Do you also see that the mind starts making up stories? You know, so somebody says, why me? Why me is one story that we go over again and again. Why did this happen to me? Maybe you think, oh, I should have done this differently, then I could have prevented this. Maybe if I had done like this and this, then it would not have happened to me. Someone says that all childhood stuff gets triggered, you know, so then it becomes bigger. So this is on top of your childhood stuff, this comes, and now it's boiling over. Right now you have to look at it. Someone says, I feel impotence, fear of being dependent on others, aware of having to make real conscious effort to ensure functioning okay, to ensure function okay. violence wrongly projected onto ourselves and others. So addictions increase, domestic violence increases, so anger is a reaction to adverse situations. And then if we have to stay inside, who's gonna suffer from that? It's the people that we love most and that we are around us, and we're gonna lash out onto them. Or we might think, oh my gosh, my situation is so difficult. I'll just have a drink. Maybe that's gonna help me. Or I go and watch Netflix movie after movie, or maybe I'll try to gamble. Maybe I'm gonna make some money and then I can buy myself out of the situation. And so there was a lot of anger, there was frustration, there was irritation. And then you have to try to stay patient, empathic, compassionate, right? Because we know that if we can bring the mind there, at least we don't put wood on the fire or oil on the fire, right? But that is very difficult in this situation because the mind gets so triggered. And so then we spiral into unnecessary thoughts and regrets. We think about the future, things that have not happened yet, could still happen, making up bad endings. And so let's talk about this mental engagement that we are doing. Something happens to us and we might, the mind goes around and around and around. And sometimes the mind, I don't know if you ever have watched what the mind is trying to do. Sometimes the mind tries to undo what already has happened. We are trying to make a scenario where that did not happen. In order to see that if we could have changed that, if I had done this differently, if I had come in a little bit later, if I had not said that, and then we play a scenario as if we want to undo what actually already has happened. Do you recognize that? We try to change the past. This is our way of dealing with the past. This is a kind of denial, right? I don't want it to happen, so I'm going to try in my mind to undo that. Does it help? Do we undo the past by doing that? We create scenarios so that we maybe feel a little bit better, but we can never undo what really happened. And so when the mind does that, then we have to say the mind has not yet accepted what happened to us. Maybe it's too painful to feel it. Maybe it is too painful to experience it. So we distract ourselves from that experience. Maybe, we can deny it, we can suppress it. And I think when we see this kind of tendency in our own mind, we can say it is too painful at the moment to accept it and to feel it, and then to move on from that, right? And then on top of that, we can say, why me? Maybe we even blame ourselves. If I had done differently, if I had done this differently, this would not have happened. And so that why me, that self-pity mind comes from the self-grasping mind. The self-grasping mind where we hold on to an I that is quite exaggerated in our mind, an I that in actuality doesn't exist, but we feel it and we believe in it. And in dependence on that self, we experience something very unpleasant. And so then the aversion arises, and in dependence on the aversion, if the aversion is very strong, it becomes anger, it becomes frustration, it becomes agitation. And so then we can have the tendency to make it about us. This is all about me, right? When we experience unpleasantness, the feeling of self, the experience of self becomes very, very strong. When we experience something unpleasant, the mind actually becomes more and more self-absorbed. Right? We start to close off from others because that unpleasant feeling is there all the time. We feel it all the time, all the time. And we try to get away from it all the time. So that self, we reinforce that again and again and again. And so then it becomes about me. And when it becomes about me, and we are in this situation that actually involves everyone, we can imagine that when we make it about me, that is also not going to be helpful in finding solutions. Whatever happens to us is is most often not about just me. It is just something that happened due to causes and conditions. And we were there at the wrong place at the wrong time. Right? And so when we experience that and we take it and we say, okay, you know, that was just some experience that I had and I let it go, it can be gone. But when we start thinking about it, why did this person do this to me? Why did this happen to us? How come that then the I, the self, becomes bigger and bigger. The self-cherishing attitude becomes bigger and bigger. And when that self-cherishing attitude becomes bigger, the delusions get fueled. The aversion gets stronger. The attachment gets stronger. And also our concern for others becomes less and less. And so being in a situation like that is very dangerous to our practice, right? Because we start thinking about me, and we forget that actually what we are trying to do is to try to generate a mind that is concerned with the well-being of others. So the mind that wanders about the past and tries to change the past is a mind that is not standing in reality. If we keep reinforcing that mind, we might end up very depressed. And we're sitting in this, how to say, this, like a pool with all kinds of negative feelings that we can't come out. You know, we fully emerge in that. Then we are sitting in a depression. We cannot move away from that anymore. That comes from not feeling, not accepting what is happening, but instead trying to change what happened. That is one of the situations that we need to address if we want to bounce back. Right? How can we do that differently so that the mind frees itself from these negative emotions, these negative reactions to the emotions, so that we can move on with our life? And so the other thing that we can do is that we start distracting ourselves. You know, we try to pretend that whatever happened is not there, or we try to find activities in order not to feel our situation, how it is in actuality. And so whether that is with alcohol or cigarettes, or I don't know how, you know, video games, or these distractions is all coming from attachment, all trying to bring us away from the present moment, not to have to feel with what is actually going on for us today. And then, of course, there is the worry about the future. You know, if we are losing things today, whether that is our physical health, whether that is our mental health, whether that is our financial stability, whether that is our friends, whether anything that we are losing, you know, we get anxious, like, oh, how do I going to do that in the future? If our relationship breaks up, how do I going to find a new relationship? You know, we are so limited in our social context. How do I ever going to meet another boyfriend or girlfriend? Or when I lose my parents, you know, I'm actually not yet ready for that. How do I going to cope? I do not know what to do. When I lose my job, I have, you know, maybe also social security is not there. I have no idea what, what to do, how to pay my bills, how to pay for my house. And when I lose my house, I might become homeless. This is a lot of stress that about the future that is very disturbing for the mind. And when the mind is disturbed, very difficult to practice Dharma. Right? So we need to address that as well. And so mental engagement means that the mind takes itself away from the present moment. And it starts either ruminating about what happened in the past, or it starts worrying about what might happen in the future. But it is not here in the present moment, actually looking like, what is the situation today? And we do that because the feelings that we are having, the nervous system cannot cope with that. Maybe our mental capacity cannot cope with that. Right? So when we find ourselves in that situation, we first of all need to be very compassionate with ourselves. It is a sign that we are suffering. It is a sign of, I do not know what to do with this, you know. So we need to take ourselves by the hand and say, this is very difficult. This is very difficult, you know, but you're not alone. We're gonna find ways of coping with this. These reactions that we have, the aversion, the attachment as a reaction to a situation also influences the body. Right? There is a lot of stress in the body when the mind keeps going over the past. There is a lot of stress in the body when we think about the future. You know, so our blood pressure goes up, our heartbeat goes up. Maybe from just doing the thinking, we get exhausted. We might develop chronic fatigue. We might develop other sicknesses like cancer because we cannot cope with the emotions. So we are in a very difficult situation, and we have to acknowledge that for ourselves. You know, it is not that because we are stupid or haven't done the right thing before, or any other reason that you are not able to cope. This is a very, very difficult situation for many people, and many people cannot cope. Right? So don't blame yourself for that. So when the mind is caught up in the past or in the future, there is no way that we can bounce back. Is that true? Can you see that? In order to bounce back, we need to find a place where we can let go everything, and then we move on from that. But when the mind is captivated by thinking, it's not possible to bounce back. We're not yet ready for that. In order to bounce back, we first need to move through the experience that we are having. And normally bouncing back happens after the difficult situation. So when the difficult situation continues, bouncing back becomes a huge challenge, you know, because the situation is still there. How can I relax in this? How can I go back to that place in my mind where I can bounce back from? Very difficult. So we need to take that in consideration, you know. Don't expect from yourself that you're just going to do it. Okay, we have to be gentle with ourselves. So in order to bounce back, what we need to do is to fully accept the negative situation that we are in, or we need to accept the painful situation that we are in. We need to feel what it is doing to us. We need to feel our desperation. We need to feel the loss that we have. We need to feel the fear that we have, the sadness that we have. And then we need to be aware of the reactions that we have to them. So bouncing back, you know, in order to understand how that happens, we can look at how animals do that, right? And I think it is Peter Levine, he's doing a lot of trauma work. So he talks about that we can look at animals who are chased. For instance, you have a deer chased by a tiger. And the deer runs and runs and runs, and while it's running away, it is very scared that it's going to be caught by the tiger. And at a certain point, it knows to escape, right? And then you can see that the deer just goes back to eating the grass, and then maybe 10, 15 minutes after it has escaped from the tiger, or maybe a little bit longer, it suddenly starts to shake the whole body. And when it is shaking the body, it is what they say, resetting the nerve system. And then it's gone. And there is nothing in the mind of the deer that sees that tiger coming again and thinks, oh, I have to run again. I have to run again. The mind is free. The tiger is gone. The tiger is not there physically anymore, but also emotionally not anymore, also mentally. Tiger is totally gone. Our mind doesn't work like that. We came with this human intelligence where we can think about things, right? And so that can be our good fortune because we can use it to liberate ourselves from samsara. But in situations of danger and trauma, it can also be our biggest enemy. Because that mind, the mind gets triggered when we feel deep hurt, when we feel deep fear, the mind gets triggered and we start reacting to that fear, to that hurt, and we start thinking, we start to mentally engage with that experience. And so then it appears to the mind as if that event is still happening. And we repeat it over and over and over again. And every time that we repeat it in the mind, physically we have a similar reactions as what happened at the event itself. And so we keep triggering this stressful situation again and again by re-experiencing it just in our mind. While if we look around us, actually, it already has gone. It is already finished, right? So this is the tricky thing about our mind that makes it difficult when we are in a situation. We do not know how to let go because whatever appears in our mind's eye appears so real, you know, that really happened. Somebody has said something very nasty to you. You hear it 100 times. 1,000 times, you keep repeating it. And every time you feel that that really has happened. And if somebody says to you, but it's already gone, you know, there was only one time that he commented like that, but you say, but he said it. He really did it. And and then we start repeating again. And every time that we repeat it, we hurt ourselves. We re-hurt ourselves. From that mind, it's very difficult to bounce back. Do you recognize that? So from there, we can think, how do we find the capacity to bounce back? You know, where is that state of mind from which we can bounce back? And in order to find that state of mind where we connect with a natural flexibility from where we can come back to ourselves again, in order to find that place in our mind, we need to let go of that mental engagement. We have to somehow realize that the story in our mind is not the same as the event itself. They are two very different things. One really happened. The event really happened. And the event can deeply hurt ourselves. But the story in our mind is not something that really happens. It is something that we make up in our own mind. We think it is a repetition or a reflection of what happened, right? And in a certain way that might be true. But is it really needed to keep repeating that? Why do we do that? My understanding, but I might not be complete, you know, and might also not be completely correct, is that we repeat a story because it is too painful to feel what actually happened. So we make up a story, and then from the painful feeling that arose due to the event, our aversion arose in the mind, disturbing our mind, wanting to move away from the event. And so in order to get to our natural state from which we can bounce back, we also have to let go of the aversion. And so letting go of the aversion, that we say, okay, that happened to me. It really hurts. And then feel the hurt in the body, in the mind. We might feel humiliated. We might feel that somebody saw all the how you say that, the legs from, you know, took the mat away. How you say that? The rug. You took the rug from under us. You might have the feeling that now your whole life is going to be destroyed. You might have the feeling that you are a failure. You might have the feeling many thoughts can come up when we start sitting with the hurt. And we need to sit through all that in order to get to the place in the mind from which we can bounce back. Have you ever done that? Does any one of you have experience with that? Yes. Does it work like that? Does it work in the way I explained it? Do you recognize the steps in the process? Yes. Exactly. Yes. Good. Yes. Somebody else says yes. So when we know these steps, you know, we can recognize them and we can say, oh, my mind is just repeating the story. I have to go back to the experience. Our experience is real, but the story is made up in dependence on the experience. Our story is a way to get away from that feeling because we feel that we cannot cope with the feeling. But when we know techniques how to be with these very painful, unpleasant feelings, then feelings are impermanent by nature, right? Feelings arise, and when they reach their highest peak, they naturally dissolve back into the mind. When negative feelings arise, the feeling that we have is, I want to get away from it. And somehow we think that by getting away from it, one day they will disappear naturally. But when we try to get away from them, we actually do not allow the feelings to arise. And therefore they cannot dissolve back into the mind. So we need to catch ourselves there. We need to tell ourselves, actually, what you're doing is you're postponing the whole thing, you know? It's like you keep putting band-aids, but you never let the wound heal. In order for the wound to heal, we have to really look into the wound and say, this looks really ugly. This is really painful. Oh my gosh, it's hurting everywhere in my body, and allow that feeling to wash over us, so that it can dissolve back into the mind and disappear out of our life. And so someone says, I know the theory, but I don't know, I can't practice it. So we'll talk about how can we practice this? How do we digest unpleasant feelings? You know, sometimes our nerve system just cannot cope. So we have to do We have to put in place somehow a support system for ourselves in which we can experience these unpleasant feelings. Someone says, after processing hurtful feelings, I have experienced triggers, triggering bad feelings again after a few years. So I would say you might not have processed the whole negative feeling. You know, you might have left some layers of that haven't been processed properly. So we're going to talk about what we can do, how we can be with unpleasant feelings, to work through them so that we can get to a place in our mind from where we can bounce back. Just want to see if there are any questions until here. Maybe you need to take a few deep breaths in order to digest all this before we can move on. And it is maybe good to know that no one likes to suffer, right? No one that's the definition of suffering. It's something that we do not like. So when suffering experiences come, everyone has aversion arising independence on that. Everyone wants to get away from that. That is our natural emotional reaction to suffering. So what we are talking about now, everyone has a similar problem. And some people, they know better how to work through negative feelings than other people. Right? In some cultures, it is natural, you know. I think what I see with, sometimes I see it with, I'm maybe not sure if I can say that, with Black people. The way they speak, they work through their problems. They're not running away from it. They fully accept it. They sit with it, and that's a general thing. But I heard it often from people with background related to Africa. They know how to do this. Probably not everyone, but at what time to start a practice? What do you mean with that? I don't really understand the question. You have to tell me again. And it can be that even when we talk about it, you know, that the body becomes quite loaded with something that we feel, I want to get rid of this, I want to release this. So how do we do that? And the first thing to do when unpleasant feelings arise, so that we can handle them, right, is that we are mindful of these feelings. And sometimes when unpleasant feelings arise, the mind is out, either in the past or to the future. That is the result from the aversion to the unpleasantness. That is the natural reaction. So when we catch ourselves somehow, you know, when we recognize what we have been talking about, that you say, oh, that is so I can see that I'm distracting myself the whole time, but I had no clue from what. I'll go and sit with it, and I'll go and feel it, and I'll be mindful of what I'm actually running away from. Right? So becoming mindful of the feelings and then being with it, being present with it, even when it is painful. And so what you can do to be present with the feeling is, for instance, to be present with the body. Right? When we say, I bring my mind to the here and now, we bring the mind to the body. The body is always in the present moment. So when we start focusing on the body, even if we start looking at our hands, even if we start listening to the sounds that are here right now, we bring the mind to the present moment. We can bring it to the body. We can start feeling what is going on. How do I feel today? How do I feel at this moment? And then we can sit with that. We can close our eyes and you can do either a body scan or you can observe your breathing and you stay with the breathing and you allow any feelings to arise in the mind. And then you contemplate the impermanence of the feeling. You contemplate that every feeling that arises in the mind, when they have reached the peak of the feeling, they naturally dissolve back into the mind. Feelings do not have the power to stay in the mind, not in and of themselves, you know. When we start thinking about the feeling, when we, in an attempt not to feel it or to undo it, then the feeling stays in the mind due to that mental engagement. But the feeling itself doesn't have any power to stay. It is impermanent by nature. The causes for it to arise already have happened. And so when we step back and we allow the feeling to fully ripen, it will naturally dissolve back into the mind. So you contemplate this, right? In the beginning, it's not easy when we start sitting with the feelings to really feel it. You know, the mind might be distracted all the time, so you bring your mind back. And you might allow yourself to feel a little bit, and then you feel like, oh my gosh, this is too much, and you run away. That's okay, you know. Then later you come back and you do it again, and you do it again, until you master sitting with the feeling, even if it's very difficult, even if it is very painful. It's not going to destroy you, right? If I would experience in this moment a very painful feeling, it cannot kill me. It is you might see it rising. You might see that I have trouble allowing it to arise. But then once it has gone, it is gone, right? And I'm still here. Sometimes the feeling appears as something different, right? The feeling might appear as something that is going to totally flush over you in a way that you disappear, that you are not able to keep your head above the water, you know? Feelings appear like that. So in order to counteract the fear that comes with that, we have to use our wisdom mind. And we have to say, is that really possible that a feeling does that, you know? There is nothing happening around me. It is just the feeling that is arising in my mind. Just the feeling doesn't make the suffering not real. The suffering that you feel is real. Can be extremely painful, but at the same time, it is just a feeling that is coming and going. And so we can also try to develop a curious mind, you know, that instead of having this aversion to, oh, I actually do not want to feel this, you know, we say, what is that? And we start looking at it and we say, oh, where is that coming from? And what is it doing to me? And how does it feel? And we approach the feeling with curiosity. That will already lessen some of the, definitely the aversion, and with that also the suffering itself. Right? Our main suffering that we have is the aversion for the painful feeling. The moment we can let go of that aversion, the moment we can let go of the mental engagement that comes with that, the suffering feeling can be very painful, but it is nothing compared to the resistance that we can build up with our aversion and our mental engagement. So then when we have some mindfulness with the feeling, then what we need to do is we need to talk kindly to ourselves. Often when negative feelings arise, we somehow take out a stick and we start beating ourselves up, right? Oh, you're so stupid, or you're such a, whatever. We're going to say something negative to ourselves. You must have done something wrong, and you didn't look right, and you didn't, you should have done this better, and we beat ourselves up, right? That is not a good environment to experience unpleasant feelings, right? You're trying to be with your own suffering. And then on top of that, you invite yourself with that suffering part of you and you start beating yourself up. So how can we, sometimes I think if I want to talk about my suffering and I go to a friend who says, oh, you are so stupid, you should have done this and you should have done that. Is that a friend who's going to be helpful? Then I say, no, I don't want to be a friend like that. What friend do you want? When you want to talk about your painful feelings, you want to be with a friend who is loving you for what you are, who is willing to listen to what you have to say, who is there to support you, who is there helping you to analyze what is all going on for you, who is there giving you the space in which you can digest whatever has happened to you, right? That is helpful. So how can you be with yourself in that manner? So visualize yourself while you talk lovingly towards yourself, where you create a space for yourself to fully feel what you're going through. And in that space, you are supportive of yourself while you are going through that suffering. And you speak gently with yourself. You encourage yourself. You put whatever you're going through in the right perspective, It is not about you. This is just an experience. Your experience is not defining who you are. Your experience is something that is happening to many people, It doesn't make it less painful. But it is not something that is just happening to you. It is not something that has something to do with you. You didn't do anything wrong. It is not your fault. Things just happen. And so once you start to connect with the hurtful feeling and you start digesting that or feeling it a little bit, you start connecting with it. And sometimes we can wonder, what can I learn from this? Or we can wonder, what is the benefit of this? There might be some benefit in me experiencing this. What would be the benefit? What can I develop? What kind of qualities in myself can I develop in dependence on this suffering? What does this suffering mean within Buddha's perspective? For instance, we can think, oh my God, I'm just purifying my negative karma. Right? This is a karma that we created. This is a karma that we all created. And now we are purifying this. That also means that we cannot just let it finish. It is not just going to be over, but we allow it to wash through our mind so that it will be purified. That's the purification, that it is washing through our mind. We can think when we are in a difficult situation, that this is not the first time that we are alive. And this is not the first time that what we are experiencing is actually happening. This is not the first time what is happening on the planet that this is happening on the planet. This is something that comes back again and again. And it is just this time that we are caught in that. Right? Some karma coming back. It's not something that we can change, but we can make the very best out of it. And so when we can speak like that to ourselves, then we can think that we are not the only ones who are suffering from this. You know, this is a human experience. And especially at the moment, so many human beings are suffering from something similar as that we are suffering from. And so by us going through this experience, we can actually start feeling ourselves, really imagining what others are going through. You know, that is a quality of the heart that we can develop. And then in dependence on that, we can develop compassion for others. We can start feeling that we are wishing others to be free from suffering. And if we are able to do that, then we can even think, maybe I can take on that suffering. You know, I can take on my own suffering. I have been doing that by being mindful of the experience, by talking kindly towards myself. I feel comfortable doing that. Now, maybe I can also imagine that I take on the suffering of others. And in return, I'm going to send them loving kindness. And I'm going to send them whatever they need. And so then when we can do that, and you still feel you're holding on to the self very strongly, you know, you can also think about emptiness. You can think about that self that you're feeling in actuality doesn't exist like that, that it is empty of inherent existence, that this experience is coming together due to many causes and conditions, that we ourselves are coming together due to many causes and conditions. And when causes and conditions change, everything changes. We change, our experience changes. Right? This is not who we are ultimately, that although it feels sometimes very solid and unchangeable, that self, in actuality, it is changing moment to moment. So you can think like that in order to counteract the feeling of self. So these are three aspects that are described in developing self-compassion. And we can see that when we start applying that, you know, then actually Dharma practice becomes more easy. The aversion to suffering starts to melt away. And we start to feel that we have a capacity in which we can take on suffering. And so we can use that for our own suffering, and we can use that for the suffering of others. And when we can get to that place where we say, I can handle this, then from there, it's quite easy to move on. So someone says, right in the middle of overwhelming storms of emotions, none of these intellectual arguments really help. Please, could you elaborate? None of these intellectual arguments, I'm not sure what you mean, because do you mean that let me try to elaborate. When you have an overwhelming emotions, you know, I think the first thing you do is that you recognize I'm totally overwhelmed with emotions. Just give me a second to sit with this. And you sit with it and you try to feel what is actually all going on. Oh my gosh, you know, my mind is going crazy. In the body, I feel this and this and this and this. You just let it, allow it to happen. You don't push it away. You don't run away. You don't distract yourself. You just let it happen. And it can take 5 minutes. It can take 10 minutes. It can take a day. Let it happen. While it is happening, you make sure that you are very gentle with yourself, and you make sure that you encourage yourself, that you guide yourself through it. This is just an experience. It is very overwhelming. My whole nerve system is out of control, you know, and you try to soothe yourself by speaking lovingly, kindly, gently to yourself. You can even imagine that you hold yourself. Maybe you feel that laying under a blanket is going to help your nerve system to calm down. Maybe you feel that drinking hot water is going to help you to calm down. Maybe, so you look for things like that. Calming down, not to suppress, but calming down to, you know, there is really a physical reaction when the nerve system gets overwhelmed, when there is a storm of emotions. So on the physical level, we can do things that can help to calm down the nerve system. And so then when you feel that it starts to calm down a little bit, then you can think, you know, this is happening to so many people, not just to me. And that thinking about other people, that is not only to develop loving kindness and compassion for them and to do tonglen in relation to them, but it is also helpful for ourselves. Because when we have very difficult experiences and we have aversion in the mind for this experience, what we do is that we actually separate that part of us that is experiencing this unpleasantness. With our aversion, we separate from that part. So we can say that our suffering part gets disconnected from others. And so then when we keep others in mind that they go through the same suffering, we actually eliminate that disconnection. We reconnect with human beings. And with that, we restore something in our mind. Your mic moves a lot and then makes noise. I'm so sorry. My mic just dropped, you know, so I put it up again, but it is standing there now. Is it still making noise? No. Is it? I'm looking at Kimpen. Is my mic making noise, Kimpen?
Just sometimes. I think you move it maybe with your arm or when you move. It's okay. It's
really?
okay.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
One time it dropped, you know, and then I had to put it up. So I'm sorry.
No worries. It's all good.
But tell me when these things happen, you know, I might also not be aware. Someone says, on emptiness or karmic cleansing, self-care is powerful. Yes. So we can think about whatever is, you know, when you are very familiar with the teachings on karma and you already done reflection on that in before you know, if you like working with the concept of karma, then when these things happen, you can think about karma. If you're still not completely clear what karma is, and you might still feel like, well, karma, that sounds like punishment, you know, then it's not such a good idea to think about karma when you go through this, right? Then you feel that you're actually getting punished. This is not a positive concept that is going to help you to to digest your negative feelings. You need something that is going to support you to move through it, not something that is going to do the opposite. When you are familiar with emptiness, you can think about emptiness. But if you have never thought about emptiness, then when you are within the suffering, it's not a good place to start, you know, because then you're going to say, oh, this is all empty. And you think this, so therefore it doesn't really exist. And therefore I make it up. Then you throw away maybe too much of your experience, which also is not useful to digest it. So you know, Dharma practice doesn't start when we feel shitty. Dharma practice starts before that. Studying doesn't start when we are in trouble and then we're looking in the book like, what do I have to do now in order to get over this? We need to practice that before. And so when we have practiced it before, we have something to fall back to. right? And so now when we are in a difficult situation, what does help a lot to start with is that practice of self-care, bringing the mind to the experience, being kind to yourself, and then reconnecting with others. And then if you can practice Tonglen, where you take on yourself the suffering, first your own suffering, then the suffering of others, or when you can see the benefits of you going through that suffering, somehow mentally you can create an idea like, oh, wow, this is actually challenging me in a place where I could develop a wisdom that I didn't have before. And maybe you feel a kind of excitement. Wow, I'm going to do that. The moment you do that, your aversion to what is happening is gone. Then the aversion is what normally stops us processing these feelings. So when we can let go of that aversion by seeing the benefits, by taking on the suffering instead of pushing it away, we move much faster through the suffering experience. And so someone says, well, how about surrendering to the higher power? So higher power, you can see higher power in many ways, you know. Karma is also a higher power. You can say you are not in charge, right? We are not in charge. Not really, not at all. Things happen to us. Lama Zopa says, you know, how can you think you have control? You don't even know what is going to happen in your next moment. You know, you might be dead in your next moment. We have no clue what is going to happen. So yes, you know, we are higher powers are at work. But I think if you want to surrender to higher powers, I'm not sure, you know. I think when you let go of you thinking you're in control, that is totally fine. When you have strong refuge in Buddha Dharma Sangha and you feel you're going to surrender to that, that's fine. So if you keep that in mind, if these are helpful powers, you know, sure, it can be helpful. But I think the main thing is that you step out of the way, that we step out of the way of what is actually happening. And so then when the feeling starts to subside a little bit or becomes less intense, then we can reflecting on so many topics from the Dharma. You know, we can reflect on how lucky we are, although we are experiencing all this suffering, although we are in this difficult situation, although the planet is going through such a difficult time, you know, we still have a precious human rebirth. And that precious human rebirth means that we have found teachings that help us to go beyond our emotional mind, that helps us to go beyond our reactive mind that constantly creates negative karma. We can actually step away, move away from that mind. And so we have found teachers who can help us, who can show us how to do that, right? So this is extremely precious. And so they say that in this time and age, which is called the degenerate times, actually the potential to transform the mind is so much bigger than when things are all go very well, you know, because we are sitting with all these difficult emotions, and that gives us the chance to take them on and take them on. And every time that we can do that, we are transforming our mind. We are transforming the mind from being reactive to a mind that is responding to what is happening. And you are responding in a way that you are eliminating your own reactivity. And when the reactivity, when we can eliminate that, the mind becomes so much more clear, you know. The attachment and aversion that is normally in the mind and all the other disturbing emotions that come from that. And then on top of that, we have all that thinking that is occurring under the influence of these emotions. They all start to subside and the mind becomes clear. And when the mind is clear, we can see. When the mind is clear, the wisdom can surface. Our own wisdom mind can surface. When the mind is clear and not overwhelmed by disturbing emotions, it is so much easier to include others within our heart. You know, it is not about us. It's about all of us together. And we can think, what can I do that is best for all of us to move together through this situation? Right? And some of us will have deep, deep, deep suffering in this time and age. And we will depend upon others. Right? We might even for food depend upon others. We might even for shelter depend upon others. That can be a very humbling experience, you know. Don't fight it. Don't say, I want to be my own, you know. Try to think, okay, this is what the universe is bringing me now. How can I make the best out of this, you know? When we can, and maybe this is what you meant by surrendering to a higher power. If you allow yourself to be dependent upon others, if you let that humble you, you know, maybe you're going to discover parts of life that otherwise you would never have discovered. Maybe you're going to meet with people's generosity. It might also be that you're going to meet with people's cruelty. Right? Then being with that, tolerating that, can also deepen your wisdom mind in a way that despite all the suffering that you're going through, you feel so much more connected to yourself, to life. You find peace with whatever is happening to you. Right? I mean, if we look into what is the purpose of us being here, you know, we always say, oh, we want to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so we can use all the circumstances in order to make steps on that path towards enlightenment. Everything that we experience can become a cause for samsara. And that is when we are reactive, when we go and be in our anger, when we react with our attachment in order to distract ourselves from what is happening. Or we can make it a cause for nirvana by saying, okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. No matter what I'm feeling, no matter how I feel crushed, I'm going to take it. And when we can take it, you know, that very painful experience that can actually crack something open in us. And when that starts to open, we can connect with the source of loving kindness, of wisdom, of tolerance, of maybe even generosity. All these qualities, we have them already inside us. You know, the potential for them is already inside us. And so very difficult circumstances can actually bring us in touch with them very quickly if we know how to take these unpleasant experiences upon ourselves. If we stop fighting them and if we somehow know how to be with them and maybe even embrace them. And when we do that, you know, something in us wakes up. And that is that platform from which we can bounce back. You know, once we reach that place in our mind, somehow things cannot ruin us anymore. You know, bad things can happen to us, but all that reactivity has gone. We know how to connect with the experience. We know how to get to the place in ourselves from where we can bounce back. We're not ruminating anymore over the experience. We allow it to happen, and then we say, how can I move forward from this? I'm gonna check in with you guys, how you're feeling. Are you all right? Are you okay? Are you still with me? This can be a lot when you hear it. This can feel like, oh my gosh, you know, this is right going into my heart where it was already so painful. That's okay, right? Then you're in the right place, actually, where we went through helps you to connect with that. We keep rehurting ourselves, yes. So now we can do it differently, right? If we know how we hurt ourselves, we can change that. We cannot change what is happening in the world, but we can change our reaction so that it becomes of benefit to ourselves and also to others. So is there anything that you need in order to be able to practice this? Is there anything that I didn't mention that you feel like, but what about this? Or how does this work? Or you can ask for that now. Could we possibly a little meditation with it and try it out? I don't know if we have time for that. We can do a very little, maybe. Is okay? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'll give you a very little summary. How do we challenge the feeling of numbness or the inability to label feelings? Give it more time. So numbness is often a result of that we have shut down the feelings, right? We shut down the negative feelings, the ones that we do not want to feel. And with that, we also actually shut down the positive feelings. We shut down. When we have shut down, then actually that is a way of your system saying it is too much. I cannot cope, right? So you have to give a lot of attention to how to cope with feelings when they're going to arise. You're not just going to take your band-aid off and say, oh, well, now you're just going to feel it all. You cannot. Your body is saying, your mind is saying, I cannot cope. So this is where you start. Oh, apparently you have trouble coping with these feelings. So what can you do? Bring the mind to the present moment, bring the mind to your body, bring your mind, maybe give yourself pleasant feelings, you know, touch yourself, give yourself a massage, go for a walk, do something pleasant, but do it very mindfully and see what happens in the mind, see what happens in the body, reconnect with these feelings, you know, and then take consciously time for that every day to reconnect. And then slowly, you know, when you then apply, when feelings arise, you apply that the techniques that we spoke about, being mindful, having kind self-talk, and then thinking about reconnecting with others. Then slowly, your feelings feel safe enough, or you have some capacity in which you can experience them. So then they will become slowly more vivid, more clear, and less numb. Oh, there was a very long one. I can never read that very quickly. Yes. So yeah, I read the last part of that. Sometimes, you know, when we have these negative feelings, what we do is like, you know what, I'm going to practice Dharma to get rid of all these unpleasant feelings. And then we're going to occupy ourselves with studying the Dharma, practicing Dharma. And I can put up my finger, you know, I've done the same thing and I still distract myself from negative feelings. It's not that it is automatic that you're going to say, okay, I'll take them, you know. Sometimes after 2 days running around, I think, oh, what am I running away from? And I have to sit with it, right? So even Dharma practice can become a distraction of this. Many people do that. So when you discover that, okay, you know, Dharma practice, we can use anything in the world to distract ourselves from what is actually going on. So good that you that you saw that and hooked yourself back. So what we did today is that we first said, like, what are we suffering from? What is happening at the moment? What is challenging for us at the moment? And how does it affect me? And then we said, have a look at your reactions. How are you coping? What is your mind doing? What is your body doing? And then we saw that when the mind is always in the future or in the past, that it makes the mind clouded, it makes the mind disturbed, and it takes us away from being able to bounce back and to move on from what we have experienced. And so in order to bounce back, we need to digest the experience. We need to accept it. We need to connect with it. We need to feel it. And by doing that, the bouncing back will happen. It's almost quite automatically, when we create this, when we move out of the way and we can really feel it, we can touch ourselves in a place in our mind from where we can bounce back automatically. So having said that, I give you a few tools that you can use when you go through difficult moments, difficult experiences, and how you can be with yourself when you experience that. And while you go through that experience, you can, even on top of what we are saying, with the kind self-talk, you can also think about impermanence, you can think about karma, you can think about emptiness, whatever works for you. Don't use anything that your mind reacts negatively to. Use something that soothes you. Use something that helps you to take it on and to move through it. And so once we can do that, once we take that on, then somehow naturally we digest the feelings and then they disappear out of our mind naturally. And with that, we can bounce back, And so then when we are doing that, when we remember that it is not just about us, but we're not also only benefiting us by going to these places inside us, actually this will affect everyone around us because we will be so much calmer, we will be so less reactive and therefore more skillful in handling or being with others. Right? And so that can be our positive contribution to the world. All right. We can do a very tiny meditation. Is that okay? So in order to meditate, we can make sure that we sit comfortably and then close our eyes. And having listened to this talk, maybe the mind goes a little bit, it's still processing everything. And you can say, that's okay, but you don't necessarily have to be present there. It is okay for you to be with your body, to feel your body. And in order to do that, you can do a quick body scan. Going from your head down through your back, your stomach, your legs, your feet, your arms,
And then you can let your mind rest either on your body or on your breath. And for the breath, you observe the rising and falling of your abdomen every time when you breathe in and breathe out. And when you are with your body, you just let your mind rest. You know, breathe out and let your mind rest. When the mind is with the body or with the breath, the mind is in the present moment. Because the body is always in the present moment. And when the mind is in the present moment, delusions such as attachment and aversion cannot arise. And even when they try to arise, you know, if we don't follow them to the past or to the future, they very quickly die out. They quickly dissolve back into the mind. By being focused on the body, the delusions naturally subside and the mind becomes clear and calm. And from that calm and clear place, we can think of whatever is disturbing our mind. And maybe I shouldn't say it like that. Whatever event is happening in our life that we find so difficult to deal with. Something that is very painful for us. Something that is shattering our life or our relationships or our possibilities for the future. And try to stay with the body and feel what it is doing to you. What feelings arise in the mind. And while these feelings are arising, you make sure that you are very gentle with yourself and that you talk to yourself or to that part of you that is experiencing these suffering feelings, that you talk very kindly to that part, like you talk to your best friend or like you talk to a little child that is in deep hurt. And you talk in a way that these negative feelings are allowed to arise totally. And just like a good friend wouldn't love you less because you have some negative feelings arising in your mind, you yourself do not love yourself less because of these feelings. You do not support yourself less. You actually support yourself even more. You recognize that you are suffering. Part of you is suffering. And that part needs to be supported. And so in that way, you provide yourself a space in which these negative feelings can arise, can be felt, can be processed. After which they naturally dissolve back into the mind. And then you remember that you are not the only human being on this planet who is experiencing this feeling. And then also these feelings are not personal. They are just something that arises in the mind of human beings due to causes and conditions. And there are so many human beings who experience something similar than you. This is a human experience. So it has nothing to do with you personally. In this human world, we experience human experiences based on causes and conditions. And that is what we share with each other. When we can connect with the experience, we can digest the experience. When we can digest the experience, we can have empathy for people who have this similar experience. We can feel compassion for them. We can truly wish them to be free of suffering. And when we can do that, our mind, our heart will lighten up. Will become light, will become open, will become spacious. And so I know that there are people here, some of you are going through so much suffering that you cannot just in one meditation session let these suffering feelings totally arise. You do step by step, every day a little bit, every day a little bit. And I'm sure that when every day you take this as your practice to sit consciously 10 minutes with unpleasant feelings that have arisen for you or that are still arising for you, you will be able to change your outlook on yourself and on your life. That doesn't make your suffering less intense, but it makes your capacity of bouncing back bigger, greater, stronger. And then we come to the end of this meditation. So whatever wisdom you have collected from this, somehow be aware of that, preserve that, remind yourself of that in the coming days. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Venerable Jamyang, for this very, very helpful and practical and down-to-earth session. Thank you so much. I think everybody I'm looking around is very much appreciating.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
And we welcome you back in April. So as most of you have seen probably on our website, check the homepage. We are continuing after the Days of Miracle program with another introductory course. And then in April, we will start reopening for drop-in activities. So that will mean morning meditations and some short courses. And we are so happy that Venerable Jamyang accepted to lead some short courses, because, well, one of the great things is she is in India. Not that she wouldn't be our first choice anyway, but she is in India, where many of us still trying to return, or we are not quite sure what's happening yet. So the dates will be very soon on our website. And then, of course, we will inform you by our newsletters. And it will be the second half of April, 2 short courses over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Can we say that already? Can we out ourselves?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's the 15th, 16th, 17th of April, and then end of April, 1st of May. Those 2 weekends. And yes, so the titles and description and the schedule will be on our website soon. So those of you who are in India and who are quite desperate to return back to Tushita, to living environment with monkeys jumping around and all of it, then this is the way forward. And then in May we're going to start residential courses again, if it all goes by plan. Yeah, nobody knows what's happening. There's many things happening in this world, but we try to move forward and we hope for the best in that way. Yeah, so dates will be on our website soon. Give us a little bit of time to get it all together. And we're also watching what's happening around the world. And yes, there's many causes and conditions coming together. Yeah, thank you so much, Venerable Jamyang.
My pleasure. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, and enjoy the Days of Miracles. And tomorrow we will have another teacher joining us, Venerable Namjong, who's usually based in India. Many of you know him, also maybe from our sister centers, from Bangalore or from Root Institute. He is now on a home visit in Hawaii. Nice place, and he's making time. It will be at a very unusual time for India. It will be noon. Yeah, 12 p.m. means noon. I always have to remind myself it's not 12 midnight, but 12 noon. So please join us tomorrow for a 2-day teaching how the Sangata Sutra solves all the problems in the world. So this is something to look forward to. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good day. Have a good evening wherever you are.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Venerable Jamyang. Thank you so much, Pamela.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Buddha. Thank you, Venerable Jamyang.
Bye.
Bye-bye.